Thank you very much, Tracy, and thank you very much to the Textile Museum and to the New Institute for inviting me here. It's always a pleasure to be in Holland, and especially here at Tilburg, for the reasons that I always echo those that Tracy has just said, that it is such a very special place, and it is wonderful to be here today, so thank you. So this afternoon I'm going to talk a little bit about smart textiles and in architecture and interiors. I'm going to use some of the projects that I've been involved with as a consultant, and also one of my books, really as a starting point to talk about some of the issues and some of the developments that I see as coming up and being particularly important for us to bear in mind and address, whether that be as architects, designers, or as consumers. So I first came to look at smart materials and systems back in the late 1990s for an exhibition that I curated for the Stedelijk Museum of Modern Art in Amsterdam. And this was the soft machine design in the cyborg age. And this is really looking at the emergence of smart materials and systems and how those were going to start impacting on us as individuals, and also what were the barriers to those moving forward. And at that stage, the main barriers were really the power supply. It was lithium batteries were a pipe dream. So much of the focus of that show was on the background for smart materials and the motivation behind that. Really looking at enhancing our human capabilities, extending our lives. And I also became aware of another issue that was emerging that was potentially much more serious than the power supply, which was that of privacy. Steve Mann was one of the original wearable technology group at the MIT Media Lab, and I first met him at the first wearable technology conference that was held there. And he took his research incredibly serious. So he was wearing his head-up display unit, which in those days was quite a big unit, essentially very large glasses with a camera at the side and massive antenna. And he was wearing that 24/7. Even at Thanksgiving at his mum's house, and his mum apparently begged him to take it off and he refused. So he was a serious guy on this. And the image that we're seeing here is from a video that he did called Shooting Back. And this is a very important piece of work, because what he was doing was looking at and this is again going back to the late 90s, the ubiquitous nature of surveillance in our buildings. And he undertook this project of going into stores, and what in the US we call big box stores, so those kind of mega IKEA type places, and asking people what these things were in the ceiling or in the walls. And sometimes they would lie to him and say, oh, it's aircon, sir. But they're essentially surveillance. And what he then did, when some of them would say, okay, it's surveillance, but if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't really be worried about it. And he would say, in that case, you won't mind if I film you. And from his bag, he would take out this large video camera and start filming them. And they literally ran. So they fled at that point. So that was point taken about, you know, the privacy on surveillance, and it really was not a case of if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be worried. So moving fast forward here, today healthcare is really one of the big drivers of monitoring, keeping track of patients, and helping them to live more independent lives, which is a real plus. It's a great bonus to be able to do that, and really well-meaning. And for a consultancy project recently, I had a client who was saying that they wanted to install monitoring systems for long-distance lorry drivers, because there was an issue with them starting to fall asleep at the wheel, and that wasn't good. And I said, well, that's a really great thing to help prevent them from falling asleep at the wheel, but what happens to that information? What happens if you've got two truck drivers and you've got one of them who needs 2 pit stops in a run and you've got somebody else who needs 8. When their contracts come up for renewal, which one are you going to renew? So what happens to that data? Where does it go? How is it being used? So something that can start off as being very well-meaning and all the best will in the world can actually have repercussions in the privacy sector. At MIT, Professor Alex Pentland, who's director of the Human Dynamics Lab, suggested that the simplest approach to data protection is really to own your own data. He did a very interesting white paper which is available on the internet for the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation on the subject. And he points to the Old English common law for 3 basic tenets of ownership: the rights of possession, use, and disposal. First of all, you have the right to possess your data. Companies should adopt the role of a Swiss bank so that you can check your data out whenever you like. Secondly, you, the data owner, have full control over how your data is used. If you're not happy with the way it's being used, you can remove it. And thirdly, you have the right to dispose or distribute your data. If you want to destroy it or remove it or redeploy it elsewhere, it's your call. So these are a start. They're not a watertight solution to achieving a balance between data collection, use and privacy. As with any technology, it's open to use and misuse. And the need for potential benefit for all parties is really weighed against the loss of individual privacy. This is another project that I worked at, moving on to look at digital images and textiles. This is one for the Millennium Dome in London, and this is for the transaction zone. So for this, the clients asked me to source a material that could be printed onto both sides without bleed through. It had to be a mesh fabric, flame retardant, and they wanted it to have images projected onto it as well. So all singing, all dancing, and with a really tight delivery date. So this is back in the year 2000. This is what we ended up with there. And really the pace of technological and material development has moved on quite considerably in the intervening 15 years. And also, alongside this, is the user's expectation of such effects. And that's a very important one on this. What we're looking at here is something from Zaha Hadid Architects for the parametric space, which was designed for the exhibition Zaha Hadid World Architecture, and that was at the Danish Architecture Centre in 2013. So here we're looking at something which is also textile-based, but this is an installation that is it's brought to life by 2 laser scanner sensors that continuously gather information about the visitors' positions in the space, and those are used for calculating the heights of the 4 actuators so that these actually can morph up and down in the room and start changing the atmosphere and responding to the presence of people in the space. So this is very interactive. It's really responding to whether there's one person or several people in the room, this type of technology where we're moving today. We're a little tighter on time than I was expecting, so I'm not going to show you the video, but this is really a look at the outside of textiles, and I wanted to make the point with this one. This is from a ceramicist called Geoffrey Mann, and it's called Crossfire. It's a good example, I think, of the power of the digital to actually inform new shapes in materials. So this, he did a video, and please make note of the video there because it is hilarious. So he did a video based on a movie, American Beauty, where they're having this huge argument across the table, and the forms of the crockery start changing in response to that, and he's freeze-framed individual moments of that to make into ceramics, which you would not have come to any other way than using the digital. And I think this is where things start to really get exciting. It's where the digital, where new media, where technology start to lead us into a space where we're creating designs and forms that we wouldn't be able to do in any other method. And before moving on, just a brief word about the importance of photography to material development. The American physicist Richard Feynman, he wrote a very important essay in, I think it was 1958, called There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom. And it's predominantly remembered as the flagging up of nanotechnology. And that's the core essence of the essay. But one of the things that he stresses again and again throughout that essay is the importance of photography to developing new materials and developing and understanding our natural world and developing synthetic materials as well. What we're looking at here is an imaging process which is X-ray fluorescence analysis. And this is being used to get close to the Mona Lisa, which very few of us will ever get anywhere near the Mona Lisa. But this is allowing us to see not just how the paint is on the surface, but beneath the surface, how it's been worked up from the very beginning, from the drawings through the different layers of paint, where there's overpainting. So a level of detail that we could not see with the naked eye. And if we think of an analogy in textiles, if we look at something like Speedo's Fast Skin, that's based on the skin of the shark, to the naked eye that looks completely smooth. Yet when you start looking at a scanning electron micrograph image of the shark skin, you see it's all these denticles. It's actually really rough. So photography is important in helping us to understand materials and also get past any preconceptions that we have, and those are often quite abundant, those preconceptions. So photography, very, very important, and we wouldn't be where we are without it. Next, I want to talk a little about really advanced textiles for health and well-being, and a key theme from this book that I published a couple of years ago, which is the importance of combining functionalities with aesthetics. And I always feel slightly awkward at this stage, so I say hi, Hill, because she's in the audience here. This is Hill Dreesen, wonderful artist and designer, and really a beautiful piece of work here, where she's combining the functional criteria for this building interior of using a fabric that is absorbing acoustics and also flame retardant, but also providing an aesthetic element as well, and providing the artwork. And it's not that long ago that what we were seeing in buildings was predominantly layering. You had the cladding on the outside, and underneath that you had all the gubbins going on, and everything was done in a separate factory and going all over the place. From a sustainability point of view, a nightmare, and also from a practical level, everybody was doing their own thing rather than doing it together. So we're seeing a really good move now towards combining these things and collaboration, and we're seeing a lot of that downstairs. If you're looking at the captions in the exhibition, you see so many people coming together to do most of those works. Very few are just one person. It's all about cooperation, collaboration. What we're looking at here is an example of a further bringing together of different elements, where these are a series of circles which are about that big, and they're combining speakers with lighting, and the conductive elements have been embroidered onto that, and lighting has been incorporated as well. This was at prototype stage, but it's again that layering of different elements and bringing those all together into one piece. And here we have the Spanish architect Enrique Cruz Gallé, and he's using ETFE foils that you will possibly have seen as well with the water cube at the Olympics or the Eden project. So these are transparent film, and these are produced as pillows. And he worked with the textile manufacturers, Vector Foil Tech, to do these, and it's performing an important role as climate control, but also incorporating photovoltaics, so that it's harnessing solar energy, converting it into energy for use in the building. The overall aesthetic, so we're seeing something for the inside, this is for the outside, it's informing how the overall building looks. And if you think of buildings like the Pompidou Centre, if Richard Rogers hadn't forgotten about the ducks until the last minute, it wouldn't look the way it looks. Here, Enrique Bruscali did do this from the very outset, but the material really informs how the building looks. And also in terms of sustainability, it makes the building physically lighter. So the foundation didn't have to be quite so deep, and you didn't have to use as much foundation for the building. So one material choice is really impacting on so much else that's going on. This is the final project I wanted to discuss with you, and this is really in relation to technology transfer. This is with the architect Zaha Hadid for Le Charleroi Dances in Belgium. And here we were creating costumes that use materials more usually associated with the city. That was the theme of this particular performance. So the materials that we used included things like geosynthetics, grids, geomesh, polypropylene, non-wovens, more normally used for filtration. And we also borrowed processes from other areas such as industrial design using vacuum forming as well. So all of this led to the creation of costumes that looked very different compared to fabrics that would have the normal stretch of lycra and that sort of thing. To the extent that actually the choreographer introduced some new movements into the performance based on the way that the dancers were moving with the costumes. This is a material that we've seen in another iteration in clothing, and this is made from recycled soda bottles. And this is the interior of a boat called the Plastiki. And this sailed from San Francisco to Sydney, and it was made completely from the recycled soda bottles, but they were made into these hard panels that were intended as an alternative, to offer an alternative to composites. And it was super lightweight, semi-translucent. Even the strips that bind the panels together there, those are also made from it. And I'm moving swiftly onwards because I've got 5 minutes to go. Okay. So not a soda bottle fleece that we're normally used to, but something that's hard, rigid, has potential in architecture, small buildings, that sort of thing as well. Helen Story's Field of Jeans. Clothing normally is considered to contribute to ill effects in the environment. Here it's actually cleansing the environment, and it's using nanotechnology to clear the air of toxins. The same technology was used in this building for MoMA as a coating for the membrane. So same coating, bring it across to different areas. So 3 challenges for the future. Sustainability. This is really looking from an environmental point of view at the energy key issue here. This is one of my student projects from last year, where the student, when they were looking at creating solar shade for the building, they suggested using graphene so that we could not just create solar shade, but actually create photovoltaics that would absorb and transform energy. Smart materials are smart design. One of those smart materials are, we have to remember to design smartly with them as well, such as Bruce Mau's use of patterns so that you create a dappled effect for the people inside and reduce glare during the midday. And preconceptions, not just as designers but as consumers. This is a Volvo Pure Tension concept car, which is looking at bringing in photovoltaic panels for harvesting solar energy when the car is parked. Are we going to drive down Tilburg tomorrow morning with one of these cars and park it outside? When will we? Will we, or are we ready? There's lots of smiles here, I can see. Not in my lifetime, I can see some people thinking that. But why not? We have to start somewhere. What next? Energy. A couple of things here that I really want to point as looking out for. One is Mercedes-Benz. This is their Vision G-Code concept car, which is coated with a multi-voltaic silver paint that allows the car to generate energy from solar and wind energy when it's moving. So the paint allows the exterior to really become a giant solar panel. And when moving, the paint allows for the harvesting of electrostatic energy from wind as it collects across the surface of the vehicle. Could we use something like this for architectural membranes? And use a collaboration. This is Unnumbered Sparks from Aaron Koblin and Janet Eshelman. This is a monumental crowd-controlled textile sculpture designed by Eshelman, the artist, with the creative director of Google Data Arts team. So it's a giant work tethered to the skyscrapers in Vancouver down by the waterfront, and passers-by can interact with the glowing sculpture using smartphones or tablets. To open the website using Chrome, they can select colors and a path, creating pattern, movement, and it changes during the day and depending on the level of interaction that's going on there. So at what point do we start to really consider and bring our users into that? I'm out of time, so I can't show you this. This is hot off the press from the Consumer Electronics Show, just happened over in Vegas, and this is 3D printing electronics. So what does this mean for if we're thinking of our amount of electronics downstairs in the exhibition, what's going on there? If we think of 3D printing all of that, what would that show start looking like? So I'm going to wrap up there. In conclusion, I would say that we were really entering some of the most interesting periods of textile use in modern architecture. Driven by a combination, I believe, of technological advances, particularly electronics and sensors, a market that ranges from games and entertainment to health and elderly care as drivers for all of this, and that's quite a rich combination, very different areas, and also the importance of collaboration between architects, designers and manufacturers. We have it in the room, the people you're sitting next to, as well as the exhibition downstairs. And a realization by the digital and electronics industries of the importance of the physical, the material to user engagement. And that I started getting from clients. I did some work for Microsoft last year and other people as well. It's really starting to come out now, the importance of the material and textiles in particular. Thank you all very much.
Yeah. Questions for Marie?
I'm around for coffee later if anyone has anything.
Anyone? No one? Okay, please.
My name is Geertje Jacobs. I'm from the Textile Museum.
Could you stand up, please?
Yes, yeah, of course. What I was wondering, you talked about open data, collaboration, working together in the field. Yeah. That's important for getting somewhere and getting ahead with innovation in smart textiles. But you also warned us for the privacy issues and the difficulties with open data, and that you really have to think if you design something, what comes out of it and can it be badly used. I thought that was quite an interesting contradiction. That you need the openness to get somewhere, but you also should be really aware of the disadvantages of the open data. I was wondering if you could.
Excuse me. There are disadvantages certainly to the open data, but I think that now we're starting to see it being acknowledged as an issue by industry and at government level as well. So I think that there are moves afoot to put in place some protection for people in terms of privacy. But it's getting the right tone for that so that it doesn't hold things back. And to some extent, there's a little bit of trial and error. Some things you can guess at, and those are kind of obvious. But other things have to be out there before you actually can start to pull back on them, which is a bit of a tricky one. But the will is there, and I mean we've had the whole thing with the Google Glass this last day as well, and a lot of that is privacy. Not of the individual owner and the person who's buying the product, but the people around them who've not bought it, not bought into it, and and it's their privacy. But until you've got a product out there like that, it's difficult to actually say this is going to be an issue, because there's a certain amount of, oh gosh, we hadn't thought of that about these things. And again, it's coming back to the intention as well, and you've got to say, you know, people do, especially in the healthcare area, where people, and worker safety, people, and like my clients, they did mean very well that they were looking to protect their drivers, but they just hadn't considered that what would happen that data. So they can then go on and start considering it, start saying, okay, what do we need to put in place? Okay.
We have time for one more question. Okay, mine was, Marie, you mentioned a couple times our preconceptions, that they can be a barrier to moving ahead. At the same time, you say that we're very open to these new collaborations, new technology. What are those preconceptions?
Well, I think that we're probably all the worst people in the world, in a sense, in this room, because we're all coming from and I include myself in this completely, we're coming from a creative point of view, so we're all thinking, I'm just, you know, I'm open to everything, I'm very creative, and in a way, that can actually not make you as aware as you might be of your preconceptions of what something's going to do. And I could see everyone's expression when they were looking at the car with the photovoltaic thing over, and it was like, no way in hell am I ever going to do that. So we do have our own baggage that we come with that we might be less aware of, because we're coming from creative background, that we're thinking, no, I'm open, but actually by assuming that, we can be more closed than somebody who's coming from a non-creative way. And in workshops that I've done with industry, sometimes the most creative and out there people are actually the people coming up from finance and from behind spreadsheets. And let loose, they're coming up with the wildest ideas, I tell you. These guys are the ones that...
They go all out.
And the designers in the room are going like, whoa, they're the guys usually pulling us back from the crazy ideas. They're the real crazies.
So that's what thinking out of the box really is.
Totally.
Yeah. Thinking about somebody else's profession.
Absolutely.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let's all try to do that today. I don't know if we can, actually.
Oh, I'll give it a go.
Okay, Maria Mahoney, and she'll be here for questions and conversation the rest of the afternoon.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.